Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, September 17th edition of the MMAOB Daily Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Adam Martin, and I'll be taking you guys through the latest in the world of mixed martial arts. Got a pretty good show lined up for everyone today. I'll be recapping Tuesday's edition of the Contender Series, talking about some of the signings there. One of them was really controversial, in my opinion. Give some updates to UFC on ESPN Plus 36, which, of course, takes place this weekend. And as well, I have news, fight announcements, and then I have Chris Rini coming on at 10:30. Chris is an artist. He's a great artist. He just released his first book of artwork and some essays with Josh Rosenblatt, so definitely going to be good to talk to him. And yeah, I'm excited for that. But that's going to be at 10:30, so I'll invite Chris in about half an hour from now. But until then, it's going to be all MMA talk, and let's start with Contender Series. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was a pretty controversial signing, in my opinion. Danyelle Wolf got signed. Basically, well, I'll go through all five of the fights. But the one signing, of course, super controversial, in my opinion. Let's start with the first fight of the night, and that fight was Kyle Driscoll against Denis Piva. Driscoll wins a unanimous decision. However, it wasn't that impressive. He won the first two rounds and lost the third round. That is not a recipe to get signed by the UFC. And Dana White, I don't think, really liked his performance that much. The guy got the win. It does help his record. That's the thing. Dana said in the interviews at the end where he's asking who's going to get signed and stuff with Laura. He said, this helps this guy's record, but he's not going to get in. But you also have to keep in mind, he also got his win bonus. And if I'm not mistaken, we don't have the salaries this year, but last year, the fighters got paid $5,000 to show and $5,000 to win. So, for Dana, I know what he's saying. I get what he's saying. Like, the guy got a win, helps his resume and whatever. He didn't mention the money. These guys need to win for their money. So, yes, it wasn't a super impressive performance. I wouldn't have signed this guy either. I don't really think he's a UFC caliber fighter. Maybe he is. I didn't really see it in this fight. But it's more than just the record for these guys. Dana has to realize that. It's the money, too. Like, these guys need to make their win bonus. So, in my opinion, an okay performance, but certainly nothing that I would have signed this guy to the contract. So I think it was okay to pass on him. Next up, and this is the fight I want to talk about here. Danyelle Wolf defeats Tanisha Tennant via unanimous decision, women's featherweight bout. First women's featherweight bout in Contender Series history. I get it. There's not many fighters in this division. I understand that. There's like literally 5 fighters in this division. You got Nunes, you got Anderson, Spencer, and then you got a few other ones like Zara Farron and Norma Dumont, and maybe there's someone else I'm forgetting. Holly Holm could fight this weight class if she wanted. Same with Jermaine Durand. But in general, there's at least there's 5 fighters at least, but at the most there's 10 fighters in this division. So I understand why Dana wanted to sign someone. They were going to take the winner of this fight regardless, in my opinion, regardless of how the fight went. So if that's the case, why didn't they just sign them outright? Why even have them on the show? Because to me, I think this girl's stock dropped a bit. I wasn't impressed at all with Wolf's performance. I thought Tennant won the fight, guys. Most people thought Tennant won the fight. From what I saw online, most people thought she won. Tuesday nights, I'm bowling, so I taped the Contender Series, just started a couple weeks ago. I've been taping it, coming home, watching it, then going online and reading what people said. So I wasn't even influenced by what other people said. I'm just watching this fight thinking, this girl's not getting signed. She's not even going to win the fight. And then she got the decision, which I was surprised by. I guess the guillotine in the third round won her that fight on the judges' scorecards. But in my opinion, Tennant did more than a failed submission attempt, which I think should score some points because you are trying to finish the fights. You are being aggressive, and it is kind of effective, but not really. So in my opinion, Tennant should have won this fight. I was pretty shocked when Dana signed her to an actual UFC deal. Developmental deal, no problem. I think that makes sense. They signed guys in the past to developmental deals like Greg Hardy and a couple other guys. William Knight's another guy. I'm probably forgetting a few. I just didn't see anything about Wolf that I liked in this fight. She's supposedly this amazing boxer. First off, I talked about this on Tuesday's podcast. Her boxing record's not great. I think it's 27-14 or 29-14, one of the two. I saw 2 different records out there. But either way, she has a lot of losses, most of them by decision, to be fair. But she has a lot of losses. I didn't really see these amazing boxing skills that everyone was talking about in this fight. Also, her takedown defense wasn't great. It was okay. It wasn't great. Her cardio wasn't great. I just didn't like her performance. She stuck her fingers out a lot too, a couple eye pokes. It's just one of those bizarre performances that somehow earned a deal in the UFC. I don't get it. It just doesn't make sense to me. I get it. I get the fact that, they need fighters in this division. She's an attractive woman. They think they can market her. At the end of the day, you have to win your fights. I don't know how many other featherweights she can beat, to be honest with you. Like, even someone like Zara Farron, who everyone thinks sucks, I think this girl could actually still lose to her. So to me, I wouldn't have signed her. I wasn't impressed at all with her performance. And in the words of GSP, and I would have passed. Let's see what Kenshiro's saying. He's here. Hey, what's up, man? Danyelle has glaring holes in her MMA skills. She's not close to UFC ready. She belongs in Belter. Agreed 100%. She might be in a year. Maybe she has to work on her takedown defense, obviously. I think she's training at Alliance MMA, which used to be a great camp under Eric Del Fiero, great coach. They had Gustafson at one time and Dominic Cruz, Brandon Vera, a bunch of guys. I'm not sure how big that camp is anymore. I guess Cruz is still there, but I feel like this is someone who probably should move to Vegas and train full-time in Vegas and stay at the PI and work on her game. And to be honest with you, she is pretty jacked. Maybe she can make 135, though, and then you lose another featherweight. Either way, I just wasn't impressed. I don't want to spend too much time on this fight, but it does bother me when someone like this gets signed, who's clearly not a UFC caliber fighter. But last year, when they weren't signing as many people, and I get it, the pandemic's forcing them to sign a lot more fighters. But last year, you had guys like Brendan Loughnane, who had an impressive fight, and he was passed over, and Dana White shit on him because he went for a takedown with 10 seconds left. And a year later, they signed the guy he beat, Bill Algeo, who's a UFC caliber fighter, in my opinion. We saw that in the Lamas fight. He's a good fighter. And then they signed Wolf, who's 0-1. It's just the difference between Contender Series last year and this year, or even the first couple of seasons, where a guy like Chris Curtis, I think he had a knockout win, and they passed on him. Or even, and people don't like this guy, but Austin Vanderford, he had a really good win. They passed on him. But they're signing fighters like this. It's kind of weird. It's very strange. So I definitely wouldn't have signed her. I think it's the worst signing in Contender Series history. There might be someone else. There's a couple guys that didn't win their fights in the UFC. Like, there's a few guys like Charles Burr. I think he went like 1-3 maybe in the UFC, or maybe even 0-4. I can't remember now. But there's guys like that, and there's a few other guys that went like 0-2 and got cut. So they weren't great signings. But I just didn't see anything about Wolf's game that would have made me want to sign her. It's kind of weird. What's he saying? Kenshiro saying she's more old than Jack. Dean was going to sign her regardless as long as she won. I agree with that. But yeah, 37 years old too, which when they have signed fighters that are like 1-0 or 2-0 or whatever, it's guys like Matt Riddle who was in his early 20s, or I guess CM Punk is one case, but CM Punk, come on, I mean that's the worst signing in UFC history. That's even worse than James Toney, because at least James Toney had the boxing experience and had that win over Tim Sylvia, right? Or that was Ray Mercer, never mind. But you know what I'm saying? Like, he's a boxer, he had some experience, and he was a championship level fighter. This fighter, again, look at her record in boxing. It's not great. So I don't really see what she's going to do in MMA, but that's enough about this fight. I really don't want to talk about it anymore. I wish the best for this woman, but I just can't see her winning too many fights in the octagon. All right, next up, Michael Lombardo defeats Corey Kupi via unanimous decision. And once again, just like the first fight, just like the fight with Kyle Driscoll, this guy won the decision. He improved his record, and he got his win bonus, but it wasn't impressive at all. He just grinded this guy out, and Kupi had a couple near submission attempts in this fight, but mostly he just got dominated. He's a really big dude for 170, but very tall and lanky, and really couldn't stop the takedown as much as he should have been able to against a guy like Lombardo. So he gets the win here. Dana White passed on him. I wasn't impressed at all. And not only wasn't I not impressed with his performance, but the post-fight, after the fight, he's saying, he's calling the guy some names, and they're going back and forth. And Bisping, I think he was commentating, was like, guys, you had 15 minutes already to like talk smack. Like, what are you doing now? Like, you could have fought and beat each other up. Why are you doing this now after the fight's over? And I agree 100% with Bisping, who, by the way, check his Twitter out, because he had a really good line for Julie Kedzie, who was criticizing him for some of his comments. Either way, I would have passed on this guy too. I mean, he's a guy that could potentially get a short notice fight, because he has been a Contender Series a couple times now. But in general, this is not the kind of guy that I don't think Dana White is looking for from the show. Not only do they want finishes, they just want guys that are a little bit more impressive than just pretty much, I wouldn't say lane praying completely, but a lot of time it was just him kind of lying on Kupi to get the decision. And again, he wins the fight, but it wasn't impressive. Now, next up, this is a fight where I think you could have taken both guys potentially. And I don't think Dana signed a guy from the show coming off a loss. I think at some point they will do that, though. And I think this is the kind of fight where you could have argued the guy coming off the loss also deserved a UFC deal. Great fight here. Colin Anglin defeats Mohammedjan Nemov. Just a great fight. I mean, these guys were going at it for 15 minutes. They were just going to war. And Anglin pulls off a big upset here. And I'm looking in the comments, and Kenshiro says he put some money on him, so that's good. He was a big underdog. I think he was plus 240. And I was very impressed with this guy's performance. He's obviously a little bit more seasoned, has a couple more fights than Naimov. I was impressed with, though, man. I mean, this guy looked pretty good to me. He's on a 7-fight win streak now. A lot of his experience is over guys that are not great fighters. So looking into this fight before it happened, I wasn't like totally hyped up about him. But after this fight, I mean, this guy's pretty good. And I'm excited to see him fight again in the UFC. 100% deserved a deal, Anglin. Even though he didn't get the finish, it doesn't matter because the fight was that good. It was a great fight. And again, for me, it's not all about finishes. I just know Dana is looking for that. He talks about every show. I want to see a finish. I want to see you want it really bad. So I think that's what these guys showed in this fight. They both wanted to win this fight. Even in the third round, they were both extremely tired. Naimov was like taking shots. Like his hands weren't even blocking his face. He's still firing back, though. That guy's got a hell of a chin, by the way. So Naimov, that's his first loss. He's 5-1 now. But again, I think he'll get signed eventually. He might even get signed like for a short notice fight in the next couple months. Hopefully he takes a couple months off, though. I mean, this guy definitely took a beating in this fight, but I think he'll be in the UFC at some point. But yeah, Anglin for sure. Definitely a good contract by Dana White for sure. And the main event, this was another no-brainer. Jordan Williams defeats Gregory Rodriguez, first-round knockout. I will say Rodriguez's chin in this fight didn't look too good. The way he was taking those shots against the fence, I don't know, man. The guy's chin definitely looks like an issue going forward. So obviously he lost the fight. I don't think he's going to be in the UFC anytime soon, but who knows? Maybe he pulls off a couple wins. But man, his chin really worries me going forward. Just the way he was taking those shots. Go watch the replay. The way his eyes were rolling back, that's scary. Jordan Williams, though, definitely a pretty good prospect, 29 years old, so he's kind of in his prime right now. It's his third time in Contender Series. He won his first fight by knockout, but he tested positive for marijuana, and the fight was overturned. Since then, he's picked up a couple wins, Bellator. Had the loss last year to Magomed by split decision and got another chance this year in Contender Series and made the most of it and got in. So kind of like Jamie Pickett a few weeks ago, he had a couple chances, and you look at him, and it was like, he's not too impressive. Then he gets in. I think for sure you got to get this guy a deal. After this knockout, hey, just one decision, probably not, but got the first round finish. I mean, that's exactly what Dana's looking for. So, in my opinion, a good signing, and I'm excited to see this guy in the UFC. Let's go through some comments here. Kenshiro says, Naimov, I thought might be the first death in UFC. He didn't want to quit. The guy's super tough, man. Super tough. It just showed how bad he wanted it. Seriously, like a lot of guys would just turtle up and cover up and take the TKO loss. This guy was like, you know what? I'm going to go the full 50 and try to win. So I got to respect that, man. But first death in UFC, I mean, that's harsh. Having said that, I mean, at some point, it probably will happen at some point. I mean, this sport's going to be around a long time. Going to be around a lot longer than I'm going to be on the earth. And I don't want to be there for when it does happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if one day we do see someone get seriously injured or, like Kenshiro said, even worse than that. And Kenshiro has another comment. Jordan deserved a contract and 3 Contender Series appearance, and the man cut weight due to diabetes. Yeah, he was the guy that said, I think he said he used his Contender Series money to help with his medicine costs, which is just really sad to hear. But the guy's definitely got some medical issues, but man, he looked good in this fight, so I'm fine with him getting a deal. I'll take a comment here from Damon, but I want to go through some news here before Chris jumps in. Damon says UFC going to get Chandler to fight Tony. That is on my list of stuff to talk about, so I'll talk about it in a minute here. I just want to give an update. That's it for Contender Series, by the way. I didn't like the Wolf deal, but the other two were fine with Anglin and Williams. If anyone has any other thoughts, go ahead and send them in the comments here. But yeah, UFC on ESPN Plus 36. Of course, myself and Cole, we broke down the entire card, all 14 fights. We broke them down on Tuesday. So go back and listen to Tuesday's podcast. It's available on YouTube, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, a bunch of places. So no excuse not to listen to that show. It was a good show this week, too. So definitely check it out. I picked a bunch of dogs, so did Cole. So definitely go and check it out. But we do have a couple updates. First off, Mirsad Bektic is out of his fight with Eduardo Gregory. Actually, Gregory's out of the fight. He's fine, but his cornerman tested positive for COVID-19. Obviously, the UFC has been pretty vigilant about that stuff. So anytime a cornerman's tested positive, they're pulling the fighter that they're cornering. So he's been pulled from the card, which leaves Mirsad Bektic without an opponent. The card is on Saturday. Weigh-ins are tomorrow. At this point, I'm not sure. I know Cole talked to Mirsad, and Mirsad said that they were waiting for another opponent. But at this point, with the fight being 2 days away, we haven't heard anything. I don't know if he's going to fight. Then again, Kevin Kroon last week, he stepped in during the weigh-ins to fight. So it's possible they could fight someone in the next 24 hours. Maybe they have already. Maybe they're doing medicals. Not 100% sure what's going on behind the scenes. I hope Mirsad stays on the card. And I imagine he'd be a pretty big favorite over whoever he fights because they'll probably be like a newcomer or something or a regional scene guy. But yeah, it's too bad this fight's not happening. I was actually looking forward to it. I was picking Mirsad. I picked the podcast, but I thought Gregory actually had a pretty good chance to win the fight. So we'll see what happens. Damon says, that sucks. I like Gregory as a dog. I was thinking about him too. I didn't pick him, but I was definitely like looking at him, and I think there was some value on him at plus, what was the last odds? Plus 410, which is kind of nuts against the guy in Mirsad, who has good wrestling, but an iffy chin. Kenshiro says Chandler's willing to fight for 120. Meanwhile, Poirier wants 300K plus. I think Poirier wants more than that. I'm pretty sure he's already making that, man. So I think he probably wants close to 7 figures. I don't know if he wants 7, but whatever Poirier wants, he deserves. But I'll talk about that in a second. You know what? I might as well get into it right now. Okay, so after Contender Series on Tuesday, Dana White was asked about Dustin Poirier and the news that the fight with Ferguson's fallen out. Dana said, I really like Dustin. I don't want to say anything bad about him, but the kid didn't want to fight. That's exactly what he said. He said, the guy doesn't want to fight, and the fight's off, and we're looking for someone else to fight Tony. He says they have someone in mind. I think he said the contract's been sent out. So you're thinking either Dan Hooker or Michael Chandler, maybe Beneil Dariush. Those are kind of the only guys I could think of right now. There's still a chance I think they could get Poirier in this fight with Ferguson. It's a slight chance, though. At this point, this card is just over a month away. I feel like these guys are probably going to end up fighting at some point, but not on this card, UFC 254. It's just too soon. Only 4 or 5 weeks for a really elite fight here between two guys who are some of the best in the world, probably fighting for a number one contender fight, or maybe even stepping in for a title shot if something happens to either Khabib or Justin Gaethje. I can see why these guys want a full camp. I'm 100% on Dustin Poirier's side here. I mean, I'm always going to be pro fighter. That's just how I am because, in my opinion, we would not have a sport without the fighters. I mean, that's just a fact. It's true that Dana White's an important figure, and Dana, he makes a lot of decisions that a lot of us question a lot of times. A lot of them end up being good decisions for him and for his business. In this particular case, I get it. COVID-19 era, businesses are cutting costs. I get that. But Dustin Poirier, this is one of the best guys in the world. This is one of the most exciting guys in the world. I love Dustin Poirier. He's amazing. He really is a great fighter. Whatever he wants, he should get from the UFC. I'm not sure why they're lowballing this guy. Give him what he wants. I get it. It's not a main event. I understand that. It's not a title fight, but it's a number one contender fight, and he might even still end up filling in and fighting for the belt. Guy's coming off one of the greatest fights ever against Dan Hooker. An amazing fight. Dana White was not there for that fight, by the way. He was not there live. He was in Abu Dhabi getting ready for Fight Island because it was the week before. So I don't know if it would have changed things had he been there live, sitting there like he does for Contender Series on his little piece of plexiglass watching the fights without his mask on. Maybe that would have changed things. I really hope they can come together and get the numbers right and make this fight. Again, maybe not 254, but maybe at 255 or 256 or something. I don't know. Or even maybe headlining a fight night card. I kind of feel like that fight should be 5 rounds anyways, Ferguson and Poirier. But if they don't make it, this gets back to what Damon was asking. Michael Chandler is reportedly in talks to sign with the UFC, and he could be the replacement for Dustin Poirier here against Tony Ferguson. And if that's the case, fans are going to be like, that's fine with me. Most fans will say, that's cool. No worries. We get to watch a great fight either way. And it is a good fight. Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson is a great fight. Chandler versus anyone in the top 10 is a great fight. But Poirier versus Ferguson is a better fight. Poirier versus Ferguson is the fight that needs to happen. That's the fight I was saying needs to happen. It just makes so much sense. Both guys basically are – it's basically the number 1 and 2 guys right now, obviously, Khabib and Justin. And then you have 3 and 4, Tony and Dustin. Those are the top 4 guys in the world. So it really does make sense to match them both up against each other. Obviously, you have Conor in there too, but he's not even fighting at this point. He's got some legal issues, as we all know. So I don't know. I know Dana said that they've already talked to someone else, but I feel like they could still get something done here. I just don't think it's going to happen at 254. Kenshiro says, deserved and what UFC is willing to pay are 2 different things, unless you can sell past 1 million pay-per-views like Jorge and Conor. You are right about that. Having said that, I mean, Jorge, had he sold 1 million before he got that fight with Usman? And also, Dana didn't want to pay him anything until they had to. Imagine that happens. Imagine they need someone to fight Khabib or Justin Gaethje at the last minute, and they have to call Dustin Poirier up. Imagine that. Then he might get what he wants. But Kevin Scott, how's it going, Kevin? Wish Dustin had a better manager. He'd be under a contract he thought was acceptable. Yeah, definitely. I know what you guys are saying too. I mean, that's another fair point I think to make. Like, these guys sign their deals. That's what their deal is. And that goes for pretty much any walk of life. Like, you sign a contract, you have to honor it. I get that. But you look at a sport like the NFL, and I know the NFL and UFC, it's peanuts. You're comparing apples and oranges. I get that because it's a far bigger sport. But they renegotiate deals all the time in the NFL, all the time. Mostly it's for cap restructuring purposes. I get that. But they'll give guys raises. Like Jason Peters, he got a raise recently. He's a tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. They re-signed him to play guard. When someone else got injured and they had to move him to tackle, he's like, I want more money, and they did it. So in this case, the UFC, they need Dustin to fight Tony. He deserves whatever he's asking. I think that they should pay him $1 million to fight. I mean, he might be getting paid close to that behind the scenes. We don't really know, but love the guy. I just hope that they can come together. And it just sucks seeing a guy like Dustin Poirier, so universally loved, kind of getting these critical comments from Dana White. It's just so undeserved from a guy that's putting his life on the line every fight. Like, look at his wars, man. Dustin Poirier is an absolute beast. And to say he doesn't want to fight is a joke. And if you're a professional athlete, if you're a professional MMA fighter, and you're told you don't want to fight, like, isn't that insulting? I'd say that's pretty damn insulting, right? I think so. Kevin Scott, I think Jorge Nate is what opened the UFC's eyes towards drawing power. True, for sure. I don't think that did $1 million. It might have broken it. Can't remember now. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Good call. David says Dustin was just another warrior. I'm sure he's in no rush to get back and can slow play his strong cards. For sure. I mean, even if he doesn't take the fight now, he could always fight the winner of Ferguson Chandler if that fight happens, in a couple months. And I'm 100% with you, Damon. I felt like this was kind of soon for him to come back after that incredible fight with Dan Hooker, who, by the way, he's throwing his name out and he says he wants to fight Tony. That fight could happen. That'd be kind of ironic. The guy who lost you ends up getting the fight instead. That'd be so UFC. I'll just say that. All right, I'm going to get Chris in here in about 10 minutes, but until then, I got a couple other things to talk about. Daniel Cormier this week, he was talking about something called the Aura Ring in an interview with Kevin Iole. And at the end of the interview, he basically slipped out. He's like, I had COVID-19, and this thing helped me figure out that I had it. But we had no idea about this heading into the Stipe fight. Like, no one knew. Dana was asked about this. He said the UFC knew, but they knew DC was also feeling better, and the doctor said he was going to be fine. That's why they didn't do anything about it. But it's just bizarre the way this story broke, just kind of like in almost like an advertisement for this Aura Ring. And then it's like, oh, by the way, DC, who just fought for the heavyweight title, who's like one of the most famous fighters in the UFC, he tested positive, but we didn't talk about that. Now, some people are going to say that's private, confidential medical information to a certain extent, but these guys are also public figures too. I do think it's important to know, like, if someone like DC is testing positive for COVID-19, shouldn't Stipe know? Like, maybe he knew, but from what we know, no one really knew except for Cormier and the UFC. It's bizarre. The other guy who tested positive is Thiago Santos. This sucks because, first off, his opponent Glover Teixeira tested positive a couple weeks ago. The fight was already moved back. Now it's probably going to move back again. Dana said they might give Glover another fight. I don't know who that'd be. I guess Rakic would be a good fight for him, potentially in October. But it does suck that Thiago Santos. I think that would have been such a good fight, Santos and Glover. I think Santos was the favorite, if I'm not mistaken, but Glover for sure had a chance to win that fight. That would have been a good fight. Yeah, I don't see the odds up right now. Either way, it would have been a good one, but hopefully Thiago Santos feels better soon. They can rebook it. I'm not sure what they're going to do here, guys. They could reschedule it, but if Thiago's going to be out for a while, then maybe they'll just give Glover someone else to fight October 3rd. That fight's coming up soon in 2 weeks, so we'll see what happens there. Just getting to a couple of fight announcements before Chris gets in here. I have Ketlen Vieira against Sijara Eubanks. That fight's going to happen next week. Interesting fights. Sijara Eubanks taking on super short notice for the injured Miriam Renault. Ketlen Vieira, she is one of the top prospects at women's bantamweight. She was ranked like number 3 for a long time. Right now she's 7 based on her first 4 fights, which included a win over Kat Zingano and also Sarah McMahon. But her last fight, she gets knocked out brutally by Rani Aldana. I was at that fight. She was actually doing pretty good in that fight. Just got massively knocked out with a huge punch. So it happens. It's MMA, but it's still pretty high on her. She's only 29. She's a good age for this division. Sijara Eubanks, 35 years old, a lot older, but she's coming off 2 straight wins, including a really nice underdog win against Julia Villa in her last fight to improve her record to 6-4. Overall, she is 4-2 in the UFC. So it does have a winning record somehow, but I don't know. I gotta go with Ketlen Vieira, I think, in this fight, guys. I would say she's probably gonna be favored, but again, I'll wait till the odds come out before I actually give my official pick. Just going to send Chris the invite here. He'll come in. The other fight announcement here, this one's interesting. This guy, Mateusz Gamrot, he's a champion KSW. He's going to fight Magomed Mustafaev, who's just had an opponent injured. So this guy, Gamrot, 17-0. Everyone's talking about him. He's got a lot of nice wins. Norman Park, he fought a couple times. This guy's solid, and he's already fought twice this year, twice in the last 3 months. So this guy's an interesting fighter for sure. I think he's a good prospect. Having said that, Mustafaev, pretty experienced guy, and he was coming off a really close fight with Brad Riddell. Overall in the UFC, he's 3-2. He hasn't fought that much. He's been in the UFC for 5 years, only has 5 fights, but overall pretty impressive in that win over Rafael Fiziev by spinning back kick knockout. That looks pretty good, looking back on it. But he was supposed to fight Renato Moicano, and the fight was pulled due to Moicano getting, I guess, probably injured. I mean, hopefully he's not sick with COVID. It just says that he withdrew here on Tapology. Hopefully he's not sick either. I don't know if we're going to find out there. But, yeah. Let's go through some other fight announcements just while I'm waiting for my guest here. Let's see a couple other ones here. Jessen, I'm looking at Marcel's Instagram. He's great. Had him on like last month. Marcel's awesome. Jessen Nyari against Luigi Fender Mini. I mean, this is kind of a surprising fight. These guys haven't fought both in forever, and they're not that great, but they're getting another chance. The only other fight, and I completely forgot to mention this earlier, when I was doing my updates for UFC on ESPN Plus 36, Miguel Baeza versus Jeremiah Wells. That fight's happening this weekend. So I'm going to break it down quickly. According to the odds, let's take a look at them. Miguel Baeza, minus 325, Wells plus 250. You got to go with Miguel Baeza in this fight, guys, obviously. It's kind of a no-brainer pick, in my opinion. Like, minus 225, it seems a little high, but this guy is really impressive coming off that nice win over Matt Brown by knockout. And he takes on Jeremiah Wells here, taking the fight on super short notice for the injured Mickey Gall, 33 years old, 8-2-1 record. He is coming off 2 straight wins in CFFC, but overall, I mean, this is a big step up in competition. All right, I got my guest here. Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, man. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, man. All right, guys.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no worries, man. So, guys, this is Chris Rini. He is an artist in the MMA space and very unique position, I think. Chris, you work for Bloody Elbow right now, and you've been for obviously writing for Vice and Fightland in the past. Chris just released his first book, guys. So congratulations to you, fine sir. The Fine Art of Violence. That's your new book.
That is correct. Thank you very much.
Congrats, man. That's the big thing. Like, how's the reception been so far? I know it just came out.
Well, I got awesome confirmation this morning that the first print run sold out. So I am absolutely thrilled. I was really, I was nervous. I was very anxious about putting something out. And, look, I make fine art, I make boutique art, I make high-end stuff. And I was really worried that, like, people who are raised on an internet culture would feel like, why should I pay for anything? But the response was just fantastic. I'm so thrilled. I made a downloadable PDF version for anybody who wasn't able to get it, and a couple people have bought those. But just the fact that people were in on the book itself, such a thrill.
Dude, it's amazing. It's called, again, guys, it's called The Fine Art of Violence, and it's co-written by Josh Rosenblatt, who used to be, I think, the editor of Fightland. So, Chris,
that's right.
I think that's where you're going to start. Like, my first question was going to be, how'd you get into MMA and the MMA space? Just go ahead, man. Talk about your journey in this crazy world we call MMA.
Yeah, well, in my early 30s, I like kind of retired from being a musician, and I use that loosely. Retired from being a struggling musician, and I'd always been an artist. And I was like, okay, listen, this is where I'm going to put my efforts now, my creative efforts. And I was working like kind of a dead end job as an accountant. For this like struggling hospital that had not much money to spend, so I didn't have a lot of work to do, and I just spent all day watching YouTube. I just got hooked on fight videos, and eventually I just I couldn't understand why certain people were winning, and I just kind of went from like voyeuristically watching knockouts to like obsessively researching the history of the sport, and I spent about 2 years watching old fights. And, learning about who all the champions were and what styles were prevalent and dominant so that was like 2008 when I got the job. And then I didn't start watching contemporary UFC events until I think UFC 117. That was like Rashad versus Rampage. but it took me 2 years to catch up, to feel like because I couldn't really enjoy fights at a certain point where I was like, I didn't really understand like the positions, especially the grappling ones, and it really was helpful to watch old stuff, watch it evolve.
Absolutely, man. And how long have you been doing the MMA art thing for a website? I know that you started Fight Line, I think 2012. Is that kind of how it's been going?
I think the end of 2012. I think in the beginning of 2013, that's when my column started.
Sweet.
And I did that through 2014, and then I started having kids, and I actually had like really bad carpal tunnel problems with my arm, and I took a long break, and then in maybe 2018, I was like, man, I got to get back in, and I just started making this cartoon, this editorial cartoon, and Bloody Elbow picked me right up.
Yeah,
and I did that for about, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months. I had a weekly cartoon with them. And then I was down in Texas visiting my in-laws, and I met up with Nate Wilcox, the guy who started Bloody Elbow. And I was like, hey man, look, I have this idea where there's this New York sports cartoonist named Bill Gallo. And he would do a cartoon every single day in the daily paper about the New York teams, about whatever happened. And I was like, I want to be that guy for MMA, just like to comment on the news, comment on the fights, and just do like almost like the Far Side, like a single panel. And he just totally, he believed in me, he's like, all right, let's go for it. And I was doing it. Started out 5, then we were doing 4 days. I think it was a little weird to like hit people with that right away, and then we went down to 4 days a week, and then everything stabilized, and it's fantastic. I started doing it full time, and only with the pandemic and whatnot, we had to bump it down to 2 days a week. But by going full time at Bloody Elbow, that's what allowed me to make this book. And if you don't mind, could I give a little explanation to the folks who might not know anything about this?
Absolutely. Go ahead, man. Where's yours?
So my major issue with MMA is that it doesn't have a season, like a World Series, like a climax that allows you to hit the reset button. And I think that causes us to, like, I'm sure you and a million other people feel like MMA fans have like this short-term memory problem. Like you have a great fight and it kind of gets washed away by the crush of the schedule itself. Mm-hmm. So I thought, I'm going to start drawing on January 1st, and I'm going to go through to December 31st, and I'm going to like take everything that happened that's notable, that's significant, that deserves to be remembered. Maybe like, obviously like some of the champions are having like the career year. Some younger people are just bursting onto the scene. Some fighters have like the best fight of their lives. I'm going to draw all those things, and then I'm going to put it in a book. And I worked with Josh to do a series of small essays. So there's about 100 drawings in the book and about 10 essays in the book. And it's a way for people to be like, this was a year. So this is 2019. This is like the emergence of Israel Adesanya, like the, Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz, like kind of like taking control of their careers, like the ever prevalent Donald Cerrone, a lot of interesting things, so that's kind of the idea behind the book, and that's why it's called Volume 1. Volume 2 will be the year 2020. I'm already working on that.
You're working on it, yeah, for sure. That's awesome, man. Let me see if this works here. I'm going to try sharing the book here. See if I can see if this works. Is that working? Can we see that?
Yeah, there it is. Awesome. As you can see, out of stock.
Out of stock, sold out. Congratulations. Yeah. That's a serious accomplishment. I mean, I'm not sure if you printed.
If you go to the top right, it says gallery, you can get a couple images from the book. Yeah, there you go.
Here we go. Look at that.
That's Wiley Zhang.
Yeah, that's definitely Zhang. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Look at this one, guys. I'm telling you, like, I mean, this is the first time we've talked, Chris.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm losing you.
And I know a lot of people, obviously. Oh, no worries. You still there? Yeah, I see you.
Yeah.
We closed the window. That's probably what. Yeah, maybe that's what's slowed down there.
Too bad.
But yeah, like I was saying, I really liked your work, man. And I know some people, obviously, maybe Bloody Elbow might not be their favorite website, but still, I think that they can appreciate what you do, Chris, because I know it can be political at times, but it's hilarious. It's hilarious, man. And you obviously have an amazing sense of humor. One of my best friends in the business, Dan, he's obviously one of your main guys there. So I've heard good things about you've behind the scenes and stuff. But
awesome.
Getting back to the book, man, like it's pretty cool you brought Josh in, and obviously it's not just an art book. There's also a written component to it. Can you just talk a little bit more about that as well?
Oh yeah. Well, I come from a fine arts background where there's often a lot of theoretical ideas behind work, especially stuff in, I don't know, the second half of the 20th century, where you have things like conceptual art and, abstract expressionism, where there's like the ideas behind it definitely add a lot of clarity to the imagery. Not everything is like you look at it and you understand it. I think that's sometimes the difference between fine art and illustration. I think with illustration, the point is you're supposed to get it from the imagery alone. And I think in fine art, you have to have a little bit of knowledge or a little bit of context. So some of my images, there really is a ton of context behind it. One really good example is the Paige Vanzant versus Rachel Ostovich drawing. I purposely didn't include their faces. It was just a tangle of limbs right before she locks in the armbar that really wrecks Rachel's arm. Right. I did that because so much of the marketing that goes behind certain women has to do with their attractiveness. So I wanted to, and I happen to have been at that fight live, and it was a great one. It was great. It's awesome to watch scrambles. It's awesome to watch good grappling mixed with striking. And that was one of those fights where what happened in the cage overshadowed the lead up. It was the terrible domestic violence stuff. And I felt like I wanted this to be about combat, even though they're beautiful women. Like, this is about combat. That's what happened in that moment. So that's where my perspective came from. So it was great to talk with Josh about that stuff and have him craft an essay explaining. Basically, you could pick this book up. I made this book so that you could pick it up 10 years from now and still enjoy it and still be like, oh, cool. Like, I understand what was going on in MMA at that time. And you should be able to, this sport is special enough that it has a history that goes beyond hagiography. That's kind of, we're still kind of shaking off the chains of that. We're still so often just lionizing people. And I think it's, that gets tiresome. That doesn't age well. It's like once we have a nuanced discussion about things, that's the stuff that lasts for generations.
That's awesome, man. Got a comment here. Kenshiro, congrats, brother. MMA and martial artist. Arts and art. Actually, Kenshiro is also a New York. I think you're a New York guy. He's also.
Yeah, I am.
He's a New York guy too, so he's always in the chat room.
Awesome.
Yeah. Is anything else you want to talk about with the book? Because I wanted to ask you about obviously some of the comments you had made recently on Twitter about something else. But anything else?
Yeah.
Did you want to plug or share?
Well, number one, the book is only available at chrisrini.com. I actually had somebody just today asked me if I was going to sell it through Amazon. I was like, I ain't giving those guys any money. They got enough money. They got enough of my money. You know how many diapers I bought through them? You know how much freaking shit I bought through those guys? F them. Let's see. You know what? I want to tell you two things. Number one, I secured 6 fantastic writers for volume 2. Josh is coming back. We're going to have Shaheen Al-Shadi, Chuck Mindenhall, Julie Kedzie, Fernanda Prates, Eugene S. Robinson, and Schwan Humes. Just an amazing, amazing cast. I sent all of these folks advanced copies of the book, and they all said yes, that they would write for the volume 2. And that just made me feel amazing. That's just, the response from the community, the enthusiasm that people have met this with really kind of humbled me a little bit. I really do feel lucky that my work is being recognized at this point. And number 2, I have a YouTube channel, Chris Rini. I'm on YouTube, and I will be streaming and video cataloging the making of Volume 2. So while it's cool to see the finished work, if you want to chat about the fights and what's going on and what deserves to be in the book, that's the place where we can get into a nice, high quality internet argument or whether or not something belongs in Volume 2. Yeah, so YouTube, Chris Rini, I'll be showing the making of the book, volume 2.
That's sweet, man. I mean, Chuck is one of the best guys ever to write about MMA. Like, he's a legend.
Yeah, man.
I met Chuck. He's an awesome dude as well. So a great guy. I can't wait to read his column. And obviously, Sean's great. Sean Humes, I work with them in MMA ratings, so I'm very well aware of Sean, and we're co-workers there. So that's awesome. I mean, there's some big names there, and dude, honestly, all the best in that second book. But I do want to talk about just a few other things
Sure.
with you. So recently, you had made a comment on Twitter, and we talked. You said you were going to be able to talk about this. Now, I don't really need to name any names, but there was a prominent MMA journalist who essentially is one of the biggest journalists in the sport. I'll just say that, and his co-host is a big name fighter, and they have been using art from, I guess, an up and coming artist. I'm not really sure what the correct.
No, I would say that's an established person. Yeah, okay. They have their own business.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Okay, so a guy who's really good at his art, obviously, and a guy who is basically doing it for exposure. Now, it's really interesting we're talking about this because I'm a writer, right? So, of course, I started writing for free, and I didn't want to, but I knew I had to. And it's unfortunately part of this business. I get that. But once you're established, and like you're saying, he's an established guy, especially when you're working. Like when I started, man, I was working for small websites, just trying to get my name out there, tried to, start writing. This guy is working with some pretty big names who obviously are pretty wealthy. I'd say at least one of them, noticeably wealthy. He's talked about it recently in podcasts himself. So I know your comments, they were met with some flack, but I agreed 100% with what you said, man. So I'd love to hear you just maybe expand on your comments about, not writing for or doing art for exposure, but actually getting paid for your craft.
Right. Well, without digging people's names up, what gets me is the idea that, you should, that a corporation, like a $1 billion corporation is like, do work for free for them in the hopes that like some MMA fan is going to scratch together their like extra change to commission you to draw a portrait of their favorite person. It's like, it is an ass backwards way of looking at the world, like whenever I see people ask things about for exposure, it's like, for who? Can you name me this person that's going to pay me money later? If you think my work is good enough that it deserves money, then you're the one who's going to pay me money. If you want it, you have already shown that it has value. And also, this is a message for any creative person, anybody with a skill or a craft. You tell people what you're worth. And if you do something for nothing, you just told them that you're not worth something. Yeah. You have to stand up for yourself, and you have to decide what your value is. You're the one who sets the terms for your own world, for your own income, for your life. And I feel for you, Adam, that you had to write for free, because I know when I worked for Vice, man, I worked for peanuts, and that's just life. I've done it myself, and the shitty thing is, like, I don't feel good about what I did, even though, man, it has paid dividends. I know Josh. I worked with Josh. Mm-hmm. We have a relationship now, almost 10 years later. So sometimes it's not about the money, but like, man, are you meeting?
I get it.
A coworker for life at every one of those jobs? Or, and that's not the thing that they're promising. They're not promising, someone who's going to care about you and someone who's going to help your career for the rest of your life. They're saying someone else will pay you money. So look, at the end of the day, when somebody wants something from you, it's up to you to decide how you should be treated, and it's a hard thing when you're a young artist. It's a hard thing when you're a young creative person, because you don't have the track record, and it's easy to exploit people. It's easy to get what you want out of them. Yep. And I think at the end of the day, it's like corporations, they can kiss your ass. No corporation should ever, ever get anything for free out of an individual. I can get a little passionate about these things, but
nothing about that, dude. And yeah, I mean, for me myself, I went to school for journalism, and I did have to take an internship. I got a job like just a couple months later, which was good. But later on, I worked for Sportsnet, which is Sportsnet is one. It's like the ESPN of Canada. I'll say that. Okay, we'll just say that. Promised money, and you write for us. We'll get you credentials to UFC events. You get to go to the UFC events.
Right.
I'm 22 years old out of school. What do you think I said, Chris?
Hell yeah.
Of course I would take it. So I did it. I got to see some good fights. GSP, Nick Diaz, some other ones, man. Gustafsson versus John Jones. I saw that fight.
Wow,
So
nice.
I saw some good fights, but they kept promising money, and I did it for free. And a friend of mine who's a really prominent Canadian journalist, he also did it, and it's worked out well for him in the end because of the experience he got and the experience I got too. It did work out, but I always felt awful about it, to be honest with you. And I remember I had multiple talks with the people that work there, and the guy who hired me was like, "Listen, man, I can't promise you anything right now, but we will get you on eventually. And can you do some writing for us?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." And it wasn't like a ton of writing; it was like once a month usually, or whatever. But I just didn't feel good about it. Eventually, I was like, "This is complete BS," and I've been stupid to do it for so long. But it seemed good at the time. I mean, I remember I went down and there was a photo shoot, and I dressed up in a suit, and I was part of the staff. And then all of a sudden, it's just like, "We don't have any money for you. Like, do you want to write for free anymore?" And I'm like, "No," because at that point I was like a few years into my career, and I was like, "This isn't right." And now, now I know what I know what I'm worth. I think I'm worth more than what I'm making right now, Chris. But I think most of us think Dustin Poirier does too, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. How high the fact that this goes on, no matter how high you go, no matter how far your career goes, it's like it should be a lesson to everyone that you're never gonna crest. Like no one's ever gonna be like, hey buddy, you're in the club now. Like when you show them your belly, you know what I mean? Like right away, they're like, all right, you get put in a you almost get put in a category like, dude, okay, cool.
That's good advice there, guys. Like anyone listening, that's good advice. He's right. I mean, it's true. And looking back, I mean, what I did, the truth is, Chris, I probably would have still did it again just because at that point in my life, it was the right decision. But, as someone who's already did that, seeing this guy recently, in my opinion, get taken advantage of, again, working for a big, not really for the big corporation, but indirectly for them, it kind of blows your mind. It's like, wow. And if he's getting exploited, who else is? Who else that we don't know about?
Right, exactly. I mean, if you looked at, obviously I work at Bloody Elbow. I read a lot of John Nash's work.
Yeah.
And you get the feeling that every single fighter, literally every single fighter is possibly getting exploited, or at least a share of money that could conceivably be attributed to them is not being repatriated to them. And it's difficult. It's difficult to look at that and feel like, I want to be part of this, even though. So if I'm going to relate this back to the book, part of all of that stuff factors in the most subtle of ways, in that I remove everything. You may notice from the imagery, there's no cage, there's no advertisements, there's no ref, there's no crowd, because I want this to be about what goes on between combatants, like the sport itself. Even sometimes people have their their signature trunks. Occasionally I'll even change. Sometimes I'll keep that. Sometimes I'll change it because I want this to be about the human body, which at the end of the day, we own ourselves, no matter what a corporation does to you sign away your name and your likeness. No one can ever take you away from you, and it's really hard for us to grasp that sometimes, because I feel like so many of us are literally struggling to survive these days. But all you have is yourself, that's it. No, and it's hard to put it into words, but so much can be stripped away from your life, and you have to realize what's truly there forever. And this is kind of like a representation of that. What's there.
Chris Rini, guys, The Fine Art of Violence, available for ebook purchase on his website, chrisrini.com. Chris, thanks so much for joining me today, man.
Pleasure.
Anything else you want to plug? Do a quick, and we'll get out of here together. Go ahead.
Oh man, if you guys like street art and something whereas I blend violence and fine art, one of my closest friends is an amazing artist. His name is, he writes under Chris RWK. You can see that's a portrait of me and my wife back there that he did for us. We've been friends for over 20 years, and if anybody likes Banksy, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring. He's kind of in that genre of people. He started an online gallery 20 years ago. Dude was way ahead of me, way ahead of the curve. He's got a couple famous spots here in New York that are like kind of like Instagram hot spots, and people want to take pictures in front of his murals. Anyway, that's one of my best friends. I love him, and he's a great artist. If you want more great art, Chris RWK.
Thanks, Chris, for joining us, man. Feel free to press that little button, and I'm going to sign off in a second here. Thanks,
okay, man.
Really appreciate
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a
pleasure.
pleasure.
Man, that was awesome. All right, guys. So that was Chris Rini, and that was man, he was awesome. Great guest there, and I hope you guys enjoyed that interview. Things are going well here for me personally. I'm supposed to be moving into kind of a new studio, I guess, like pretty soon. So hopefully that's going to be in the next week or two, guys. And it should be an upgrade, I would say. So hopefully you guys will like that as well. Who knows? Maybe I'll start doing more interviews and stuff. But either way, I really appreciate everyone joining us today for the podcast. So you guys can check me out at MMAdamMartin on Twitter. I'm available there anytime you want to talk about MMA. Also check me out, MMAOddsbreaker.com. That's my home. Bunch of articles there for UFC on ESPN plus 36. So definitely check that out. MMARings.net. I have an article coming out on the Woodley Covington fight. And of course, BJPenn.com, podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, iTunes, Google Podcasts. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, that's where the podcast is. Once again, guys, thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the fights this weekend. I'll be back on Tuesday to recap the fights and preview the next UFC card. Have an awesome weekend, everyone. Take care.